genel izleyici kitlesi için uygundur.
Saat Farkı'ndan merhabalar. Ben Feyza Gümüşlüoğlu. Her hafta farklı ülkelerden konuklarla bölgesel ve küresel meselelere dair farklı perspektiflere yer vermeye çalışıyoruz. Dünyayı Ekotürk ekranında buluşturuyoruz bu programda. Bu hafta stüdyoda çok kıymetli bir konuğum var. Şöyle biraz eskilere gidelim. Hatırlayacaksınızdır, hatırlayanlarınız olacaktır. İngiltere'nin eski başbakanlarından Tony Blair'ın baldızı Müslüman oldu şeklinde manşetler o dönem kamuoyunu epey meşgul etmişti. Eski Başbakanı 97-2007 yılları arasında İngiltere'nin başbakanlığını yapmış. Tony Blair'ın eşinin kız kardeşi o dönem gazetecilik yaptığı bir dönemdi. Lauren Booth'dan bahsediyorum. Filistin'e gitti o dönem iş için, haber için ve orada gördüklerinden çok etkilendi. Ardından İngiltere'ye döndü, araştırmaya başladı bir takım şeyleri, özellikle Kur'an-ı Kerim'i aldı, okudu vesaire. Şimdi kendisinden zaten uzun uzun dinleyeceğiz ama o Filistin ziyareti hayatını değiştirdi. Ardından sık sık Filistin'e döndü, Gazze'ye gitti. Özellikle abluka döneminde de yine Gazze'ye gitti ve gördüklerinden çok etkilenerek ardından 2010 yılında Müslüman oldu. 2020 yılından itibaren de aslında İstanbul'da yaşıyor. Kendisi bugün stüdyomuzda biraz Filistin'in gözlemlerini aslında, Filistin'de o dönem kendisini nelerin etkilediğini kendisinden dinleyeceğiz. Ve biraz da tabii Batı medyasının özellikle kendisinin İngiltere'de yapmış olduğu gazetecilik, geçmişindeki gazetecilik deneyiminden hareketle biraz tecrübesini Batı medyasının Filistin-İsrail meselesine bakışını da konuşmaya çalışacağız. Hoş geldin Lauren, welcome to my show. It's wonderful to see you, to have you here.
Thank you. Hoş bulduk. Selamun aleyküm.
Aleykümselam, hoş geldin tekrar. Çok teşekkür ediyorum. Well, I think we will do it in English. We will continue in English. Maybe next time in Turkish, hopefully, inshallah. So, Lauren, you have a very interesting and inspiring story, let's say. As I mentioned in the opening in Turkish, you are, of course, related to Tony Blair, former Prime Minister in UK. And that time, I also remember as a journalist because you were on the headlines, especially after you converted to Islam. But for our audience, for them to better understand your story, first of all, I would like to ask your, especially the first time that you went to Palestinian territories as a journalist in the UK. And after that, because not maybe immediately after that, but after several visits, you started becoming really interested. And what was the impact of the first visit on you so that you started thinking about some different things, and then you, after several years, you decided to become a Muslim?
You know what? This is a good question. The question really at the root of this is, what can journalists learn when they go to Palestine for the first time? And what is hidden from them? Because what I found was that there was an expectation as a Western journalist to follow a very strict protocol. And that protocol is you go to Tel Aviv, you get permission from the Prime Minister's Office of Israel to travel into Palestinian territory. So we have to remember, number one, you come face to face with what an occupation means. So you get permission to go into the occupied territories. And then what you're supposed to do is stay in a hotel in Ramallah and only do interviews in your hotel. So local dignitaries, interesting people, they come to the hotel. You don't go around, you don't travel on your own, you don't meet the people. How on earth can you possibly get a fair overview of what life is like in Palestine and the political situation and the civil situation unless you travel around? So I didn't know any of this. I went as a columnist. I went to find truth. And that allowed me freedom to just travel around, get into cars that stopped, go into shops, go into people's houses, visit refugee camps with nobody watching me and nobody dictating what I saw. And I was so horrified to learn that there was a 21st century apartheid that no one had told me about.
What was in your mind before and what really changed after the very first visit and then the next following visits?
I think that's, again, a good question. Look, when I first went, I knew that there was an occupation of Israel in Palestine. Now, even that is quite radical because there are great swathes of human beings who think that Palestinians occupy Israel. So I had some basis. But I did not realize the mechanisms of control of the people. And what changed was going through checkpoints, seeing people herded like cattle in terrible gridlocks just to get to work, meeting the parents of killed children and meeting the fathers of adult girls who wear nappies because they've been terrorized by the machinery of occupation. I think that humanizing of the situation is what happened.
Mm-hmm. Lauren, I also want to relate your story actually, to a recent report that I read on The Guardian. So, because I think it's very interesting, it was on The Guardian maybe 10 days ago, published 10 days ago. The headline is, "Young Americans are picking up the Quran to understand the resilience of Muslim Palestinians." They are turning to the Quran to understand the incredible resilience, faith, moral strength, and character they see in Muslim Palestine. This is from The Guardian.
Yeah.
How is that? How do you, reflect that when you look back in your personal history, actually?
When I started seeing on TikTok and on other social media platforms, young people across the Western world going, who are these Palestinians? How are they not broken by this? How are they able to recite their book and say, thanks be to God when this is happening? And I thought, my God, that's the journey I went on. I totally relate to their experience because something miraculous is being unveiled to the world. On the one hand, a great mechanism of evil. And we are talking occupation and genocide paid for by the wealthiest nation on earth, the United States, and one of the most powerful nations on earth militarily, Israel, onto people who have no control over their land, their sea, their air. They don't have trains. They don't have railways to go to other nations. They have nothing. How is that possible? And then the beauty of their manners. So I think one of the big things that I'm seeing unveiled in real time, right, because of the ability, by the grace of Allah, of Palestinians to get their message out is this, that they're sharing. That when a calamity comes to them, instead of going, this is mine, I'm terrorized, they're cooking in the streets for each other. They're rescuing cats from the rubble with great joy. They still have the capacity for love. Mm-hmm. And I think in all the darkness that we have in this world today, whether it is in our own souls or in a political climate, this is touching our souls.
I also wonder at that time, when you go back to your newsroom, let's say, because you were at that time working as a journalist still in the UK, what happened like when you shared all these things that now you're sharing with me, when you shared them with British people, with your editors? What happened really? Well, how was the reaction from them?
I came face to face with the framing of Israel-Palestine, okay? So my first article, I said to my editor, look, I'm risking my life. I want every word to be my own. And I don't want you to change any of it. As long as it's accurate and it's, there's no grammatical mistakes, I don't give you permission to change it. You don't actually get to say that to an editor, do you? Right? You don't get to say to the editor, it's my show, I'm going to do what I like. But I felt so passionately about it. He read the piece, which I sent him from Palestine. He said, it's great. I promise you, we won't change a word. And I felt like, wow, my naps.
Do you remember the headline? What was the story about?
I'm going to tell you the headline. So one of the stories that I told in the piece came with photos. We had a photographer with us. It was in Jenin. And again, Jenin had just been invaded by the Israelis and houses had been destroyed and children and mothers and families were living in tents. And I went to see this directly and I tried not to cry. I did not have the training and the capacity as a journalist to see this stuff. It's very traumatic.
You were not a war correspondent.
I wasn't a war correspondent, but I managed. I marked my hands like this. I took a breath and I spoke to the kids, what do you want to do when you grow up? And the answers were amazing. One of them said, I want to be a doctor. The other one said, I want to be a teacher. And the other one said, a psychotherapist. All right, in Arabic, obviously. And I said, why a psychotherapist? And the child said, because my people are hurting and I want to cure them. Not one of these children said, I hate Jews and I want to be a terrorist. So, what was the headline of this? The headline was, over a picture of me with the children in Jenin, which of these children will be a doctor and which a terrorist? The words after that don't matter. Because you framed it in a way that allows the killing of those children. And that's what's going on till today.
So you never had that kind of challenging time with your editors? Because, you know, we have been talking about Western media coverage of the current also, and also previous, of course, Israeli-Palestinian conflicts. And a lot of Western journalists have been accused, of course, of being pro-Israeli or having biases. So at that time, how was the reaction in the end? I mean, they didn't change that story, but after that, what happened, for instance? Because you've been back and forth, I think, UK and Palestinian territories, right? You went to Gaza during the blockade, if I'm not wrong. So what happened afterwards, for instance? Then you quit your job, or you were forced to quit, or what happened? I mean, as a journalist, as a British journalist, what kind of challenges you faced that time?
I carried on with my work, but I tried to get as much information about Palestine and as much new framing as possible into everything that I wrote. So as a columnist, you get to do 5 or 6 pieces on a page and make comments on them, right? So most weeks when I was doing this, I would try and get something in about Zio-Nazis or, you know, Zio-fascism, which were terms that were never used in the British press. Sometimes they let them through and sometimes they wouldn't. But I was allowed to do that. Because, why? Because I was a named journalist. People could hate me and not the newspaper, right?
Yeah.
If you're a news journalist, you're on a completely different parameter and I would have had no chance.
Right. Now, Lauren, what do you think of the Western coverage of the current? Do you think there is a change, major change, for good or bad? Do you think more kind of awareness in the West, especially because there are now some people saying that there is kind of, in public especially, when we look at the protests, street protests in the Western countries, capitals, do you think there is more awareness in the public towards humanizing the Palestinians, at least in the media and also in their perceptions, let's say?
You've actually asked 2 questions here. The first one was, what has the media coverage,
right,
mainstream media coverage, what do I think of that? Appalling, dire, making allowances for genocide to happen, framing all Palestinians as culpable for Hamas, not accepting the rights of Palestinians to resist under international law the occupation, framing the story as if violence started on October the 7th, 2023, and it was all la-di-da and roses before that. I think the mainstream media across the West has absolutely made themselves irrelevant. I hope they're irrelevant, because we now take our sources from online shows, podcasts like this, you know, different media, and we should do, because they are bought and sold by the big powers and money.
Lauren, if I may ask, because I forgot to ask, and at this point I also wonder when you went back to your country, because at that time I think after your first visit, Tony Blair was in chair. He was prime minister. Did you discuss with him, for instance, what you saw in Gaza, in the Palestinian territories, and after you went back, did you ever talk to him?
Honestly, I don't like talking about Tony Blair. He, you know, is a family member who I don't have a lot of contact with. Why? Because guess what? People in power don't like criticism.
Right. Because I'm also asking this. I read his recent statements on the ongoing conflict. He is, of course, blaming Hamas attack for October 7, but also he said decades of conventional Western diplomacy around the Israeli-Palestinian issue will need to be fundamentally rethought. This is from his statement. Do you think there is, when you look in general, the Western reaction or inaction to Israeli-Palestinian issue, do you think that some things will start changing after this?
Listen, I don't think it's changed anywhere near enough. They still see the non-state of Israel as having legitimacy, when it is a settler colony put in the Middle East by Britain and America to protect their interests. They're not going to have a fair voice for the Palestinians as long as they have that narrative. And that hasn't changed, not one bit. They're just a little bit embarrassed by the amount of death it's taking.
Also, Lauren, I also wonder, because whenever a Western guest appears on a TV show, especially in the Western, the Palestinian background with, or Arab origins, moderator or the journalist immediately asks, "But do you condemn Hamas?" So especially since you became a Muslim in 2010, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
After that, did you ever, or still, for instance, recently, did you ever encounter a question like, for instance, okay, you became a Muslim, you are reading Quran, but Hamas is also using the Quran, justifying these kind of attacks? I am just asking, as a, as a journalist. I mean, do you ever kind of face these kind of questions or reactions from people? Okay, you became a Muslim, but this is also happening in the name of Islam. So do you also face these kind of questions? And what do you answer? What is your answer to them?
So not about Hamas specifically, but I've been on many talk shows in the United Kingdom where they say, well, they make huge statements like, well, of course, the hijab is used to denigrate women in Afghanistan. It's like, well, hang on a minute, we're talking about Iraq here. Or, what do you think about Iran? I'm sorry, we're talking about London here and being a Muslim in 20... So this all-encompassing, right. You're all the same. You're all blanketed together. Nobody's allowed an intellectual difference. That still goes on.
Mm-hmm. Nothing has changed in the, do you think? Or there's...
I think there are journalists breaking free. I have heard reports that there are BBC journalists crying in the newsroom.
They sent a letter to Al Jazeera.
And many have signed a letter. I think it's going to be harder and harder to keep journalists on side because people are getting their news from somewhere else. And then if you're not proud of your job, you don't want to do it anymore. So I really appeal to my brothers and sisters who are in the world of journalism. Follow your guts. Be a person of dignity and ethics in your work.
So especially after October 7, afterwards, do you think these started changing a little bit?
A little, yeah. A little. I think there's some movement. I think what has changed is for the first time, Israel does not have the sympathy. Israel does not have the majority of sympathy on the online world. I've never seen that.
Some people are also surprised to see these protests in the Western capitals, as I mentioned earlier. What do you think? Are you also surprised to see, especially people protesting against Israel in the Western capitals, such as London, Brussels?
Do you know what? Actually, I'm not, because in 2003, I was a part of the march against the Iraq war, and there were 1 million Britons there. And that was way before I was Muslim, but I remember looking around and going, these aren't people with Middle Eastern family. These aren't people of their faith over there. These are genuine day-to-day people who just, have a decency in them. So I think there is an uprising of decency, inshallah.
So you're not surprised at all then by the...
I think I'm surprised by the amount and the determination.
Yeah. Especially in Washington, D.C.
Washington and Berlin.
Yeah.
Berlin, where these things are criminalized. That's surprising. And I think there's a great deal of hope for Gen Z right now. Mm-hmm. This is Gen Z's in Turkey. I
was just going to ask your opinions on your observations about Turkey, actually, because how do you see Turkish public? Because there are so many things at play, I guess, here in Turkey. Yeah. There is some kind of, let's say, not hatred maybe, but towards refugees, towards Arab refugees. So how does that play out when it comes to Palestine-Israel issue? What are your observations?
Well, I've been spending a lot of time with teenagers because I've been doing talks at Imam Hatip School and taking questions. And some of what they are saying has really surprised me, and it's given me hope, and some of it has shocked me. So a couple of young women yesterday, 16, 17 years old, Istanbul, born and bred, they said, look, they said that there are pro-Israelis in Turkey, especially amongst the young. And I said, how is that possible when such a hateful act is being done on civilians in Gaza? She said, because we hate the Arabs.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I was
and
asking actually,
even some of the prejudice she gave me specified it. She said, we hate the Arabs. Some of us hate the Arabs because we hate the fact that the Syrians left their homes. And we, the Turks, when we were under attack, we never left our homes. So that makes the Arabs cowards. So a lot of very strange racist thinking out there.
Right.
And a lack of empathy. You know, all of these issues of racism come from a lack of empathy for another human being. Let's be honest, by the grace of Allah, Turkey has never been bombarded from the air. We don't know what it is like.
hope we never know.
Inshallah, we never know.
If you never went to Gaza or Al-Quds or wherever you went, do you think this change would happen to you eventually by reading from far? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I would have definitely supported the cause of the Palestinians.
Because surely being there had a huge impact on you. So I just really wonder, for someone who is reading the Western media, who is following the Western accounts, do you think radical change is possible for them?
As a thinking journalist, when you see an image and you see the words or hear the words and it's completely different from the image, as an intelligent person, you go behind that and you do your research. I was already researching about Palestine. I was listening to international speakers on this. I was on that political journey. What changed was my view of the way of life, knowledge of why we exist, and love for Allah Ta'ala. The Palestinians taught me that, and they taught me humanity.
Can you give us some, because sometimes we forget those human stories. Can you just remind us some of the really impactful human stories that really got you during that time, or even maybe current?
They're just it's just generosity when you have nothing. I was in the West Bank in January. I didn't have a coat. An old lady came up to me in the street, Palestinian lady, and she just dragged me into her house and put a coat on me and then wrote her number down and put me back in the street. And I'm like, she doesn't know if I'm coming back, but she could not walk past somebody who was cold. That level of common decency. Or in Gaza, where I was blessed to be for a whole month, one Ramadan, alhamdulillah, to see people who have nothing giving to people who have less, and still saying the most said word in Gaza every time that I visited is one word, alhamdulillah, all praise and thanks to Allah.
Despite everything, they're
despite everything. And that certainty that life is from the beginning of the universe until the final day. It's not 70 years. And that gives them strength and courage to carry on beyond their lives.
That really impacted. So that was the major impact, I think, when you considered also becoming a Muslim. I mean, eventually, right?
It was. Look, becoming Muslim isn't because you like falafel and you like Palestinians, okay?
Right,
it has to be the teaching that there is one God, and all of this makes sense. And what we have to do is worship God and be good to one another, and then it's going to make sense. And it somehow, subhanAllah, it does. Allahu Akbar.
Did you ever try to go back? When was the last time you went to, by the way? And are you planning to?
2013.
Are you planning?
I'm really trying to go back as soon as possible, inshallah, and do what we can to help.
And what would you advise for people? Because some people are discussing also ways of boycott, whether it's impactful against the, ongoing boycotts against Israel. What would you advise, for instance, for people, especially for young people, for Gen Z, as you called?
Don't be tricked into doing nothing. All right? The power players would love you to do nothing. Do something. If you like Starbucks, say, I'm not going to go there. But know why. Why are you not going to Starbucks? Because America literally creates weapons that kill Muslim children. And if you're not Muslim, kill human children and human beings. And why? Because they actually sent their troops. And why? Because they want to control the region, and they are happy with death as a mechanism of power. And we are not happy with that. And all of the American big businesses, well, let's go to Turkish ones.
Right.
We have great stuff here. Let's support the other options, inshallah.
Yeah. And what about that watermelon brush that you're wearing?
I hope everybody notices this. If you don't know what this has been a symbol of Palestinian resistance since the 1950s. basically the Israeli government said, you're banned from waving the Palestinian flag. Now, because this is red, white, black and green, they used to eat watermelons in the street in front of the security guards and the army. And it's become a symbol of beautiful resistance.
Is it from Istanbul or from there, back from the old days?
This I was given, oh no, that's back from the old days. No, this is from the symbol of resistance.
No, this brooch is from Istanbul or from...
This was given to
from
me
your visit?
yesterday
Okay.
from an Imam Hatip school.
Okay, it's beautiful, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lauren Booth, for coming here and for sharing your very inspiring story. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Çok teşekkür ederim. Evet, Saat Farkı'nda bu hafta Lauren Booth'u ağırladık. Eski İngiliz gazeteci. Filistin konusunda da epey aktivist kişiliğiyle tanınan, sosyal medyada bilhassa uzun yıllardır bu konuda yazan, çizen, özellikle Batı'nın Filistin konusuna yaklaşımını, İsrail yanlısı tutumunu eleştiren bir isim. Girişte de bahsettiğimiz gibi İngiltere'nin eski başbakanlarından Tony Blair'ın da eşinin kız kardeşi, aynı zamanda 2010 yılında Müslüman olan, ardından da 2020 yılında da İstanbul'a yerleşen, 2020'den beri de İstanbul'da yaşayan bir isimdi. Hikayesini bizlerle paylaştı. Önümüzdeki hafta yine farklı bir konuyla, farklı bir konukla karşınızda olmak dileğiyle. Hoşça kalın.